Hello, Waterford Wesleyan Church Online. My name is Pastor Matt, the assistant pastor here at Waterford Wesleyan Church, and we just have two quick announcements for you. And the first is this. One, I just want to make sure that you guys know about our website. That's waterfordwc.com. You can see it in the description of the video here, but also it's just waterfordwc.com, waterfordwesleyanchurch.com. It's real simple. There you can find all of our videos, you can find all our ministry, you can find out where and when we have church here, or any future events that we're going to be having. All of your questions can be there, or if you have questions that aren't there, all our contact information is there at the bottom of the page. So I just want to make sure that you guys got that information. Again, that's waterfordwc.com. Second announcement is this. Starting July 17th, we are going to be doing what is called Summers with Screwtape. Now, for many of you, you know what that means. For many of you, you might not know what that means. The Screwtape Letters is an awesome book written in the form of a bunch of letters by a guy named Screwtape by C.S. Lewis. Many of you know that name from the Narnia books. Well, it's the same guy, C.S. Lewis. And we're going to be going through the Screwtape Letters here at the church at your pace. It's going to be an online forum, and if you want any more information, just hold tight. We've got more information to come. But write that down on your calendar if you are interested. So, with all that out of the way, here is Pastor Paul.
I once heard a wise person say this, that it's far more enjoyable to have a terrible meal with great people than have a great meal with terrible people. And you think about that, you're like, hey, that's really true. I mean, I know it for me. I'd much rather have a hot dog on a park bench with my wife than a $60 filet mignon with somebody that's a jerk or just kind of mean or nasty. And I'm sure you would as well. It's just kind of the way we live life. We may not think about it all the time. It's about choosing people over things, and we do this often. But it's not, of course, limited to meals. I've had this conversation with every one of my children as they enter into the workforce, and that's this. Hey, you know, you can have a great job but work with terrible people and you don't want to do it. But you can have a terrible job and work with great people, and it's really kind of a joy. It's amazing how that works. Ultimately what I'm talking about is choosing people over things. And that's just kind of the way this life works. This life is made wonderful not by where or when or what we have. This life is made wonderful by who's with us on that journey. That's what makes this life so valuable. And this is really what we began to, well, not really discuss this aspect of it, but we began to lay the groundwork in our last video of just kind of saying there is a place that God has placed you now, when, and where you are in this life. And sometimes we don't like those places. We may not like where we are in time. We may not like when we are in time and where we are in location. But that isn't the whole of life. Even down to meals or jobs. We already understand this is about something far more significant. It's about relationships. The people that walk with you through this life. And of course, I'm talking about your spouse. I'm talking about your childhood friend that's still your friend to this day. I'm talking about your children. I'm talking about your parents. I'm talking about those people that, well, the ones that you would have a terrible meal with and look forward to it. But even more than that, I'm talking to you about your relationship with God. Because ultimately, that is what connects us to God. It's not just religion. Too often we use that word, but when I examine Scripture, I see it's more about a relationship with God than it is this religion, this kind of structure. And although structure is good, I'm not saying that, but listen to how Scripture speaks about our relationship with God. It speaks always in relational terms. In Matthew chapter 6, verse 9, it tells us He's our Father. In John chapter 15, verse 5, He is our friend. And then John chapter 16, verse 7, He's our counselor. And let me tell you, we all can use a good counselor once in a while. And those are just three quick examples of just kind of laying the groundwork and understanding that this life really is about relationships. It's not about circumstances. It's not about when, and it's not about where. Although those have influence, it's who's with you on that journey that make it so sweet. And if we are in a relationship with God, no matter where or when you are, knowing that He's with us can take a terrible situation and make it better. And this is, again, what we began to talk about a little bit in last week's video, but not so much specifically this, the where and when you are in time, and you may not like that. And as the Apostle Paul interacts with some leading thinkers of his day, he begins to talk to them about, hey, God has set the boundaries of where you live. He has set you in this particular generation. You're there, but He doesn't end it there. And that's where we're picking up today. It's not just about where and when you are, something else that goes with it. So we're going to go back to Acts chapter 17, and we'll begin reading here at verse 16. While Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was greatly distressed to see the city was full of idols. So he reasoned in the synagogue with both Jews and God-fearing Greeks, as well as in the marketplace day by day with those who happened to be there. A group of Epicurean and Stoic philosophers began to debate with him. Some of them asked, "What is this babbler trying to say?" Others remarked, "He seems to be advocating foreign gods." They said this because Paul was preaching the good news about Jesus and the resurrection. Then they took him and brought him to a meeting of the Areopagus, where they said to him, "May we know what this new teaching is that you are presenting? You are bringing some strange ideas to our ears, and we would like to know what they mean." All the Athenians and the foreigners who lived there spent their time doing nothing but talking about and listening to the latest ideas. Paul then stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus and said, "People of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious. For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, 'To an unknown God.' So you are ignorant of the very thing you worship, and this is what I'm going to proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, and does not live in temples built by human hands. And he is not served by human hands as if he needed anything. Rather, he himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. From one man he made all the nations, and they should inhabit the whole earth. And he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. God did this so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from any one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. As some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring." Just a quick recap of what we talked briefly in the last video is this: God has you where and when you are. He marked out the boundaries and the times that you live. You are there. It's no accident. Now, here's the rub. You may not like it. And I've already kind of covered that, so I don't want to spend a whole lot of time there. You may not like where you work. You may not like your school. You may not like your neighborhood. You may not like your state, and on and on and on and on. But God has you there for a very, very specific reason. And here's the other part of that. You don't have to do this alone. And where you are is intentional by God. Listen to what the Apostle Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 17. He says, "Nevertheless, each person should live as a believer in whatever situation the Lord has assigned them, just as God has called them. This is the rule I lay down in all the churches." To me, that's a summary of you live when and where you are. And another way I've heard that said is grow where you're planted. So God's got you where you are. And again, if you don't like it, if you don't like your current season, even physical location or time, it's not over. It's not just about what you may or may not like. And the truth, again, is God has you where and when you are. And what happens is this: when we realize that we're living in that, we come to this very humbling reality that you and I are not sufficient to handle the things in this life that are too big. And there are going to be things in your life. If you're not in a season of we don't like when or where you are, you will be. And what that does is that brings us to a place of going, I can't do this on my own. And the Apostle Paul tells the thinkers of Athens, hey, then you're going to start looking for God. You're going to look for something bigger than yourself because, well, you and I are in over our heads. And he wants us to reach out to him and seek him that we may know him. And this is what Paul is telling the great thinkers of Athens. And what that does is when we choose to look not at our when and our where, but we start looking at our relationship, we start looking to God, we look to something else, it pulls us off of those things that we may not like, and it points us to something far greater. We seek the one then who is not bound by time, the one who is not bound by boundaries, physical boundaries. He's omnipresent, he's everywhere, and he's outside of time. So we don't have to worry when we trust in him. Your current, your past, and your future life circumstances, well, when reshaped in a manner, can point you to God. The good, the bad, and everything in between. How? Because it's a humbling reality that you need him. I need him. There will come a point in your life where you're in over your head. Again, Paul says to the church in Corinth, even when he explains his own personal circumstances of being in and over his head, saying, I don't like where and when I am. In 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 8 and 9, listen to how he says it here. We do not want you to be uninformed, brothers and sisters, about the troubles we experienced in the province of Asia. We were under great pressure, far beyond our ability to endure, so that we despaired of life itself. Indeed, we felt we have received the sentence of death. But this happened that we might not rely on ourselves, but on God who raises the dead. You see, that's not just you, that's not just me. There's somebody from ancient history saying, yep, I'm in over my head, but I know I'm choosing not to look at my circumstances. I'm going to trust in the one who raises the dead, the one who can do what's impossible. And our God hasn't changed. So what Paul spoke of is still a reality for you and me today. So let's go back to Acts chapter 17, verse 27, and he reminds us of that one more time, where he says, God is not far from you. He's not far from us, I think is specifically the way he says it. Or another way to say that if he's not far from me, then that means he's near me, right? And so that reality, no matter what you're walking through, that means God is near you. The psalmist says it this way in Psalm 145:18. The Lord is near to all who call on him, to all who call on him in truth. He is with you when you call on him. I mean, let the power of that statement just kind of settle in on you for a moment. I don't know what you're going through, and maybe you're not in a season that you don't like. Maybe you are. But just let the power of that statement settle in on you. Consider the reality that God's promise to you and to me is that he is near when you call on him and I call on him. You don't like where you are, you don't like when you are, you don't like what's happening in your life, and you're trying to do it on your own and you feel like you're drowning. God is near, and he's waiting for you to call on him, to reach out to him. You know, to me, I kind of it got real simple for me when I began to think about it this way, that the promise is God is near. He's not far from any one of us. Psalmist says he is near. And no matter what I'm going through, if I'm not experiencing the power of God in my life, even just to maybe get me through it till I get to victory in him, the only thing that's getting in the way of that is me. My unwillingness to reach out, my unwillingness to turn to him. That got really simple, didn't it? So it's not so much, is God going to be there? Will I choose to seek him at least in that season? Especially if you don't like when and where you are. His promise is he will be there. Let me just give you a few examples. He's near in the trials. Romans 8:35-37. He's near in the grief. Psalm 34:18. He's near in the anxiety, Philippians 4:6-7. And he is near in the scarcity, Philippians 4:19. And those are some big ones: scarcity, fear, anxiety, maybe even loneliness. Maybe yours. God is near to you no matter when or where you are. And the question ultimately then is, will you reach out to him? Will you seek him? Or will you keep trying to do it on your own? Look, this very well may be where you are today. This may be your circumstances and your situation. And if it is you, I want you to think about it this way. I want you to take what's happening around you and reshape it and rethink. Remember, it's far more enjoyable to have a terrible meal with great people than it is to have a great meal with terrible people. And so let's think about it this way. It's far more enjoyable to have a difficult season of life with a great God than a great season of life with no God at all. Why? Because you're a relational being, and so am I, and so is God. And we are all going to be, maybe here and now or in the future, in a situation where it is more than you can bear. And God is near. He is not far from us. And he's waiting for you and for me to reach out to him. In those circumstances, the good and the bad, in all of life, he wants to be your heavenly Father. He wants to be your friend, and he will be your counselor. He will not abandon you. So, the ball's in your court. What will you do today? If you're in that season, you don't like when, you don't like where you are, will you reach out to him and let God show you something far greater than your season or your trial?